Well, I listened to what the mayor had to say. And I listened to what the folks from San Bruno had to say. And I listened to what Bruce had to say yesterday at the reception. And I had conversations with folks that went through Marshall, Michigan. Every time I hear the firsthand accounts of what people are going through, it's not individuals, it's not someone else's issue. These are people. These are our neighbors, they're our family. They're people that are going through very difficult circumstances and recovering, and their whole communities are traumatized. It reinforces in my mind the importance of what we do. And when I say we, I'm talking about the collective we. I'm talking about industry reps out here. It's your responsibility to make sure these things don't happen. It's your responsibility to make sure your pipelines are in good order. Regulators, okay, I'm pointing at myself here too. It's our responsibility to make sure that the industry is abiding by the regulations that are established through a fair process. And those of you from the public, thank you. It is your pleasure and your responsibility to hold us all accountable. I consider the Pipeline Safety Trust to serve a very valuable service. It's painful a little bit for us, for the regulators, because sometimes you say, hey, you're not doing the job the public needs you to do. And that's painful to hear, because we feel like we try to do the right thing. But sometimes we need someone else to point out areas we need to get stronger, to strengthen our rules or our oversight. So I say thank you. And I thank you for keeping pipeline safety issues in people's awareness. Don't let these tragedies become old history. Don't let them become something that happened a while ago. Make changes happen. Okay, so I'll get off my soapbox, so to speak, but thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your stories, and that's to everybody. So when, on a somewhat lighter note, when they told me that they wanted me to come speak about aging, I thought, oh God, here we go again. I have to tell you, about a month ago, I have a career coach, and my career coach says to me, we're talking about life plans and career stuff, and she said, so how much longer do you have to work? And I said, well, I'm 46. Well, I will be 46 in December. And she goes, you're just a young chick. She says, you got 15 to 20 more years to work. And I'm like, that's really not something that you want to hear, right? Retirement sounds real good. But then on the flip side, she just told me I'm a young chick, right? Thank you, Stacy. Well, the flip side of that, as I was with my 6-year-old nephew not too long ago, and I said, hey, let's go down to the park, because I would really like to play on those monkey bars and do some swinging. And he looks at me and he goes, but Linda, you're really, really old. So either I'm a young chick or I'm really, really old. So I'm preferring to take the middle ground. So what does that have to do with anything, with pipelines? It's about perspective. And whether something is old or not has a lot to do with its ability to perform. Hopefully I'm still fit for service for my work. I might not be so fit for service on monkey bars, though. Okay, so a couple questions. What is old? I would say, am I old? I'm not asking any of you, by the way, to answer. That's rhetorical. Is a pipeline old? And if it's old, is it more risky? We just heard a really good presentation by the mayor about some old, very old pipe that sounds pretty risky to me. Okay? So if a piece of pipe is old, is it necessarily risky? Are all types of old pipe risky? And what about those regulations? Carl asked us to speak to regulations. So what do the regulations have to say about old pipe? What do they say? Are they protective enough? And what about replacement or rehabilitation, or what about programs? What are people doing to address these issues? So can you all see this chart in the back? You notice how everybody gravitates towards the back of the room? I've decided on my presentations I'm going to have to make my graphics bigger. So can I take this off? Carl, will I break something if I take this off?
No.
Do you see that? Okay. The reason I'm doing this, I don't have a pointer, and I want to point. Okay, so 55% of all hazardous liquid pipelines were installed prior to the code. So that means this part of the circle. Okay, you can analyze this later in more detail. The statistics are actually on our website that back this up, but what does that really mean? That means that 55% of the pipelines in the country are at least as old as I am. Okay? Is that a bad thing? Maybe. Maybe not. Let's go farther. Okay, so most liquid pipelines are constructed of steel. The vast majority are. They were... Oh, I got a pointer. The red button. Oh, yeah, but can anybody see the red button? Oh, you can? Wow, okay, that's impressive. Now let's see if I break it putting it back on. Okay. Okay, so most of this pipe was installed after World War II. There's this big surge of industry, big, baby boom, The country was in a growth stage, and we needed energy. So these big cross-country pipelines for hazardous liquid and natural gas were installed. This is just a big surge. And so you got a lot of those steel pipes going across the country. Similarly, for gas transmission, similar numbers. 59% were installed prior to our regulations. Okay, what does that mean when I say it's installed prior to the federal regulations? It means that they were installed in accordance with, hopefully, industry best practices, industry standards in place at time. There was no federal agency that went out and said, are you constructing this line in accordance with best practices? Now, there may have been some state and local entities that did that. There was no federal agency, at least to my knowledge, that did that. Okay, again, these gas transmission lines are mostly constructed out of steel pipe. Okay, and I'll explain why that's important. Gas distribution, totally different matter. Why? What? If you look at these statistics, look at the numbers here. Only 31% of gas distribution was installed prior to the regulations in 1970. Very significant portion, and I would bet that a large portion of those are on the East Coast or in our older cities. And see Sue Flex going, yeah, right there. Yep. And so the mayor will know that he has a lot of it in his city. Pennsylvania has a lot. I think it's one of 4 states that has the most cast iron. That's the old type of pipeline construction material. So what happened here? Older pipelines, gas distribution lines, were made out of cast iron because that's what was available then. That's what they used. They used bare steel. Bare steel is steel, but it doesn't have a coating on it to protect it from corrosion. And you also have some copper lines out there. So what happened? Where is this big shift? Why did we see this change of what was constructed prior, or percentage? What happened was people started discovering the use of plastic for gas distribution lines. Generally, gas distribution lines are at a lower pressure, so you can use plastic. And so you see more plastic installed throughout our communities. General rule of thumb, hazardous liquid and gas transmission go cross-country. You got a lot of cross-country lines. Gas distribution systems, which do contain some transmission lines, are in our communities. They serve our homes. When you want to, I thought a picture that the mayor had was so appropriate. You had an aerial view of a city and you drew a square. What I was struck by is how many of those homes have a natural gas line going to them. Maybe not many, maybe not all. All pretty much? Okay, I want you to think about it. When you fly out of here, when you catch your plane and you fly out, look down on the city. When you fly into your home city, look down on the community. And I want you to imagine in your mind there's a pipeline going to most of those homes. And what is that pipeline containing? It's transporting natural gas. It's taking an explosive or flammable, I should say, a flammable gas, directly into people's homes. Now, when you think about it separately, say, oh, well, we've got 2.5 million miles of pipelines in the country, I think it's 2 million miles of gas distribution. That's a lot of mileage. Think about it serving homes. But think about the need for safety around those lines. Okay, so let me go back and talk about this. So we have pipelines being installed. People said, how old are pipelines? This tells you how old our pipelines are. But it doesn't tell you if they're bad or not. So as cities expanded, they used plastic in a lot of distribution systems. So in the older part of cities, the older towns, you're going to see more cast iron. In the newer parts of cities, you're going to see more plastic. Okay, why am I boring you with this? I'm coming up. Okay, so there are two issues that relate to aging infrastructure. Okay? One has to do with the material and the techniques that were used to construct those lines. So if you installed a line in 1950, you didn't have any federal regulations. There were no requirements on construction standards other than industry best practices, okay, and industry standards. There was no oversight. So you constructed them using different methods. Okay, now there's more oversight on it. But there are different ways you construct things. We can't look back in time and determine exactly how every pipeline was constructed or installed. Okay, that's one issue. The other issue when you look at older pipelines is you have to look at the material. Does the material withstand the test of time? Or does it degrade? I can almost guarantee you that a piece of pipe that's been in the ground 80 years has been exposed to more threats, more risks, the one that was installed 5 years ago. Because you've had more people digging over it, you've had more operational issues. It's just a function of age. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that pipe's integrity is less. So an example I wanted to use, how you sometimes think about these things. If I have a car, 1956 Chevy, which I used to have, red and white, beautiful car. It wasn't a convertible. But it was maintained very well. And it could run down the road. It was a safe car. Okay? That car's sitting here. Then I have my 1989 white Grand Am that I used in my frivolous days, and I passed on to my nieces and nephews. I'll tell you what, that Grand Am, 1989 Grand Am, has seen more life than most people ever will. May it rest in peace. It's no longer with us. My point is, the integrity or the fitness for service of anything has to do with the way it's maintained. Okay? Just because a pipe is old doesn't mean it's bad unless it is subject to age-related or time-related degradation. And we'll talk about some of those. Okay, so we did some initial studies and looked at some data. And we found out that pipe installed in the 50s and 60s have a similar incident rate per mile as pipe installed more recently. Okay, that's steel pipe. So what does that tell us? We know that steel, if properly maintained, will not necessarily degrade over time, unless it has some inherent flaws in it that grow with cycling and such. But pipe installed in or before 1940s have a higher incident rate. That's pretty old pipe. 1940s, that's 70-year-old pipe. That's not a good indicator. But we don't know if that's related to age or if that's related to its service, how it's been used. Okay, so how am I doing on time, Carl?
We're running a little behind.
I'll speed up. Okay, so steel pipe, a couple things you have to look at. Vintage issues on steel pipe. You look at the seam types. That's an issue that's come up. That means when those pipes were constructed, did they use good manufacturing methods? What were the welding controls like? You know? The service age issues. How many of you are familiar with a term called cycling? Anybody? No? Every industry person ought to have raised their hands there. Okay? The simplest way to think of cycling in my layman's terms, take a paper clip, okay? Bend it mildly, okay? Now do that for 80 years, okay? If a pipeline has flaws in it that'll grow due to cycling, those are going to grow faster in that paper clip. It's going to wear out quicker, okay? Some pipelines it may not affect at all. It may have a 200-year life or 300-year life. It's hard to tell. Some of them, if you have cracks in them due to manufacturing processes, those cracks may grow and that paper clip could become more flexible and have a problem quicker. That's a very simplistic view, by the way, and I'm sure there's some metallurgists that are going to get me after I get off the stage. But so service age. So if you have a pipeline that is subject to cycling issues and it's in service for 50 years, it's going to have been exposed to more of that than a newer piece of pipe. Corrosion prevention. If that pipeline has always been under cathodic protection and it's been under a good cathodic protection system, it won't rust as quickly as one that doesn't have that good maintenance. 60 years is a long time. Now I should mention, I'll get to cast iron here in a minute. I'm talking about steel pipe. For cast iron, you have different issues. You have the construction practices. You have congested areas where those lines are in. You have service age issues. Those cast iron lines are in areas that are that could be subject to soil movement, frost heave, things over time. I can pretty much guess that Pennsylvania has a lot more frost heave issues than, say, Texas, Nevada. You're going to have different issues. So cast iron in, say, Austin, Texas, may behave very differently than cast iron in Allentown. And those are things that we have to pay attention to. Not all cast iron is created the same. And then plastic pipe. Remember, we had less steel and more plastic pipe. Plastic pipe is flexible, it's easy to install, it's cheaper to install. You have more options. But there are also issues that have come up with plastic pipe. So when plastic pipe became the rage, everybody started installing it. And we thought it was great. And it is. Don't get me wrong, plastic pipe is a really good thing. Except if you install pipe that later has problems and it starts to degrade due to soil or the environment or just the material properties. And we saw that. We saw that with a type of pipe called Aldelay. We saw that with mid-century pipe. And once it's in the ground, we said, oh my gosh, we've got to get it out of the ground. Where is it? And if we didn't keep good records of where that pipe went in the ground, we're going to have a hard time getting it out. Okay, so you have 3 types of pipe. You have a lot more, actually, but the main category, steel pipe. You have cast iron pipe, and you have plastic pipe. So if we at the federal level come out and say, Mayor, we believe in your state, the Pennsylvania PUC should eliminate as a priority all plastic pipe, put all your resources on plastic pipe, what good is that going to do you for that cast iron? Because your highest priority may be cast iron, okay? In a different state, the priority may be plastic. And so we believe it's important every single state looks at the highest risk pipe that they have and addresses that, have a plan to address that. That's part of the Secretary's call to action you heard Cynthia talk about, and I'm almost done, Carl. A couple of things that are really important for people to understand. Old does not necessarily mean bad. But it does mean if you have pipe that's high risk, you need to address it. You need to understand what you've got, and you need to take action. So part of this call to action, it's kind of interesting how it works. The Secretary of Transportation uses his authority to call people together and say, I need you to take action. And guess what, industry? I need a commitment from you to take action. If you look on our website, you can see letters of commitment. But then comes the next part. You know what the next part is? It's called accountability. I should also mention that the Secretary looked at my own office, PHMSA, and said, and what are you all going to do about it? Which we now have a laundry list of action items that we're working on. The point is, you have to know what you have. You've got to develop a plan based on the highest risk in your state, and then you have to hold people accountable. And this, I'm coming full circle here because Part of accountability is making sure all stakeholders are involved and provide input. Now I'm going to skip over this. This is what the regulations require. I'm running out of time. But basically we do have requirements that say you have to address this pipe if it's a problem. This ANPRM that we issued, it suggests that we change our regulations. If you haven't commented, you should. This is where you make a difference, and along with forums like this. So please, please do comment. Holding people accountable, holding individuals accountable, and holding companies and regulatory agencies accountable is important, and I thank you for all you do. I do appreciate it. Thank you all.